think just firstly introducing myself, I'm Katie Padwick. I'm a technology recruitment lead at Accenture. I've been with Accenture for 11 years, and I think the longevity of my time there is really important to the changes that we're seeing nowadays, especially across TA. Probably one of the biggest challenges for me at the moment are two things. It's number one, getting confirmation on the right skills that we need to recruit for out there, but also keeping your teams engaged, your recruiters in the know-how in terms of what their role looks like, especially in a world where we are relying heavily on AI. We are utilising and using AI across a lot of our recruiting processes. So it's that middle ground. So making sure that the recruitment that we're doing actually is fundamentally the right skills that we're recruiting for within our organisation and keeping our people happy. So those are the biggest challenges for me. I'm not going to say I've overcome them, but they are ongoing, they're critical, and it's definitely a work in progress right now.
Hi, I'm Harpreet Panem, so I'm the recruitment manager for our tech COE. So I think the biggest kind of like two challenges we've had, again, is going to be workforce planning. I generally, like, main part of the business I look after is consulting. So as we know, consulting changes daily. So that is where it's really understanding the business's pipelines of client works and how is that going to affect the recruitment side for us externally. The second challenge we have, I would say, again, it's quite tech focused, is D&I, female hiring, especially with local talent. That is my kind of biggest challenge I've probably had the last 2 years. So the wins, right, because there were challenges and there've been challenges there for 2 years. I have so slowly started working with a certain business to work with workforce planning. We've seen success in our SAP market. So we had 6 months to build talent pools with the business because they actually told us what they were recruiting for. The success would be on the day the role was actually approved. We had 16 interviews on day one to arrange. The D&I focus for me is that has been a win. For me, I've gone back and looked at my recruitment funnel from the top, from attraction all the way to offer, and implemented, amended every single stage, but working very closely with my stakeholders and just letting them know the benefits of this to them.
That's awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Ollie. I work for Made Tech. We're a tech consultancy firm that works with the public sector. And I look after all our talent acquisition and mobility. Got different variations of the same thing, I think, as challenges. One of the ones we really feel, certainly as a consultancy, is that time to hire. A lot of the time we might win work and we don't always have a huge amount of notice on when that next piece of work might land. Often we feel then as a team that we're being quite reactive. So there's lots of other repercussions from a kind of workforce planning perspective and how we navigate that. We've made some solutions, but certainly it's still also a live problem. That's definitely true. And then with that, I thought it was really interesting what you already said there, Katie, about the skills. Because there's this kind of reactive nature in the organization, we're always thinking about what do I need in the next 3 months, and really trying to help and encourage our hiring managers to be thinking, what skills do I need to bring into the team in the next 12 months and beyond? Because those things definitely aren't the same. One of the things that I would say we've had as a real success has been our introduction of our cross-functional panels. So that's where we've brought in and actually really tried to bring the business in with not full success, but I'd say over 90% success of hiring is an all-company team effort. And so everybody needs to be involved across the organization. And there's lots of other things we found as a success to that. Not only being able to interview sooner because we've got a wider interview capacity, but also bringing in lots of different kind of perspectives to that hiring panel has really, for us, helped our quality of hire as well. So I'll stop there, but that's been some of our wins.
Brilliant. So I've had the unique benefit of meeting these fabulous people yesterday. So I know a bit about some of the challenges that they've faced into. And just to do some myth debunking as well, because we've got Katie, who's at Accenture. So this is a global, pioneering organization, Harpreet at EY, and obviously Ollie at Maytech, which is a much smaller firm. So some of the strategies that we're going to be talking today is really going to span, smaller organizations as well as larger organizations. And so one of our first questions, and this is really relevant actually, when we think about, workforce planning and tactical demand planning versus a strategic workforce plan. Let's face it, I don't think many organizations have got there. But open to the panel, how would you approach workforce planning in a company that has never done it before? So, Ollie, perhaps a good starter for you.
A great question. We're very popular this afternoon, aren't we, with all those questions? We'll try and answer them as best we can. It's been interesting for us as a smaller company, I suppose. We've gone through that journey, I suppose. I wouldn't say we do it very well right now, but we've also been learning as an organization about how to do it. And I think crucially also, we've got a lot of hiring managers and some of our leaders that haven't done it before. So there's been a few different ways we try and tackle that. One actually is from a talent acquisition, about how do we bring more of that expertise in to help us to mature. That's definitely been one. The next part of that actually for us has been the relationships that we have with our commercial team. So a lot of our ability to be able to start to meet that demand really relies on the quality and confidence you can have of when we expect to be winning work, what that revenue looks like for us, and then start to effectively map out what those roles and skills look like when you're going to bring that through. So it's not certainly the most scientific place to start, but I think that relationship with the commercial team is crucial to be able to start to build that through. And then you start to think about, okay, what's that demand coming through? Is it particularly in our tech and engineering space? What are those skills we're looking for? When do we think that will need to be landed? What are those kind of project pipelines that are in place? They're really kind of crucial steps for us to then work with the head of engineering, for example. What have we got in our organization? What are the aspirational skill sets, if you like, that we've got in our teams? We can start to build a semblance of a hiring plan that can start to map towards that and what's actually essential and what at that point is a bit more aspirational. So for us then, it comes back to that relationship back into the business. We're really ineffective if they just treated us at the end of the process as this kind of transactional, okay, we've got this thing through, or we didn't know it was coming, Ollie, but actually I need someone in 3 weeks. I've failed, the business has failed, we've all failed in that respect. So we need to build those relationships to get that earlier insight and work through how we're gonna build it together. So as a starting point, I would say that's one of the best places to go.
And so, Katie, working at Accenture, where we assume that Accenture's got a really great strategic workforce planning strategy, right?
Yeah, so I think from a global level, absolutely, we have a number of really strong processes in place. We've got very relevant teams that help us navigate through the difficulty of talent planning. I think, though, the thing about working for such a big company is that as much as people make the assumption that actually we've got everything in place and it works well, we have in terms of the infrastructure, but it's actually about creating processes which are very much in line with your own market unit and with your own countries to really strengthen the value of talent planning and how that operates. So I think for us, especially, it's been a very uneasy and difficult time over the last few years. We have a bench model. We are a consulting firm. So we need to make sure not only are we hiring for the right skills, but that people are going to be chargeable on our client work. And I think that goes back to actually finding the right skills and making sure that we are looking in the first place for the right people. And it's not just one team that does that all. Like Ollie said, we work closely with our talent planning team. We also work closely with our hiring managers to understand their business, to actually gain an insight into where do they see the skills or foresee the skills that they're going to need over the coming 5 years or so. And then it's actually about providing them the resource and the insights to help make those decisions. So there are a number of different teams and people that feed into that conversation. It's not kind of a one fit for all on a global level. It very much needs to be assessed, reviewed more locally to make sure that we've got the right approach for us. So that's something that I think we've really had to focus on, especially in the last couple of years. And that efficiency about being able to forecast in advance so that we've got enough time to go after that talent when we know there's a very challenging market out there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Katie. There was a couple of questions here. I know they're all flowing, but perhaps Harpreet can take this one, which is around the key data or metrics you use to assist with business buy-in. And I know that you've done some work at EY around ED&I, so perhaps you can cover off that question.
Yeah, so I think crucially for me, the last 2 year key learnings has been data, MI data, how important it is. Data wasn't something I loved until I realized the benefit of it and the power of data. So what we used, if we're looking at, so we've done a project on D&I and quality of hire as well. We did a project of quality of hiring and we worked very close with our talent team to really understand what is the skills that is missing in the business. And that really helped with the workforce planning. So the data points we used was your time to hire, your time to interview, the cost of hire. And then really, like I said, the big side for us was actually the quality of hire, is who actually interviewed these individuals, what questions were asked, and actually do the job descriptions match what we were looking for? Did we actually hire and ask the right questions for us? So I think when data points is 2 points, one is the hard data points and one is the soft. So we went back to the business. We've done like a stakeholder service. We've done candidate services. Other stuff we did was actually speak to our new joiners of them starting after 3 months. Actually, did you actually get hired for the role we said it was? Did we miss something in recruitment? Did we miss something in the interview process? Did we miss not selling something? Or did we not give enough information? And once we gathered that from especially our new joiners, we actually adapted a lot. So at the moment, like example is I've created a 50-50 split on an interview matrix for every role for gender. That's male and females for every grade. So no interview matrix will have not a gender split. That was because to put data points at the back for D&I. How many females were we actually losing at application point? How many females were we losing at interview stage because we didn't show them that diversity in the team that there currently is?
If I can add something on that, that's awesome, by the way. I would add it in the next step also, like where you get it you're still going to have some hiring managers feeling quite skeptical about some of that stuff, is then like, why does that actually matter for them? So we could talk about quality of hire. Well, that matters because you might actually then have people that aren't performing in the role, or you might have people that aren't actually still with the organization in 12 months' time. That's costing you. What is that costing you? Is that the reputation of your team, the quality of your output? Is it in a consultancy environment, the actually revenue amount? You can't bill those people out. You're a people business. You can't do that. So it's trying to find what actually those hiring managers genuinely concerned about. What are they being held to account to? And finding a way to bring those metrics into that conversation. We could talk a lot of MadeTech about some of the challenges we've got, but only when they're starting to feel it, when they've not got the right person available to them the next week, are they really going to care about it? So it's just about trying to find the best way to frame that back into the business.
Yeah, it's really good points. And I think there's always this perception from the business that recruitment effectively are transactional and, potentially just taking orders, around not value driven, not providing insights, not really bringing the best candidates through that process. So really keen to hear from your views how you've been able to manage your teams and yourselves from moving away from this kind of reactive perception that the business holds to one where you are really a proactive talent partner, and whether you've got some real examples to share with everyone. I don't know who's going to take this one.
So what we've done is we really, like you mentioned, AI coming up. So we really kind of over the last 12 months have looked at what do we want the recruiters to do. So we've changed the face to trusted advisors, is really going through each stage of the funnel of the recruitment and saying, at what part is your job, right? It's really easy in recruitment to be a yes person. I've done it before and gone, oh my God, I'm going to do this because you're going to love me and you're going to give me great feedback. So I always say to my team is, where are you going to add value? Where are you an expert? You're not an expert if you're trying to book a interview or you're trying to do an ad hoc request. That's not your value add. You can make such an impact. So it's just going through the whole recruitment funnel and going back to your teams and going, to be that trusted advisor, to be that person who's going to advise, you need to understand what areas of skills you've got and escalate to your manager, right? If you are pushing back and you're not getting that spot, is to go back to your leaders and say, I don't want to do this. I've got a lot more to offer than just be a yes person.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And Katie, I know at Accenture, this is going to be a big challenge, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's big volume. You've got a massive brand like EY, lots of candidates. And sometimes managers just think, you know, just give me the right candidate, right? So how do you deal with this?
Yeah. So I think it really comes back to the partnership. You know, we could have a number of tools that will help support our process and our recruiting. But actually, it's fundamentally those relationships that make us successful recruiters. The transactional piece and being maybe yes people, I think, it's long gone in terms of being able to have valuable conversations with our stakeholders. We need to be able to show them insights. We need to be able to face off where appropriate, but give them the guidance around the market. And the only way then we will be able to form those relationships is through those tangible conversations. And I think that's the biggest challenge. Also, you know, we kind of work in a world now as well where people are more remote. We're not having face-to-face connections as much with our hiring managers. We may have had certain periods of a lull within recruiting across a number of organisations in the UK, and the shift to, you know, the industry sectors or the skills that we're recruiting for is constantly evolving, and we can't always keep up with that. But we're not always here to be able to give the right answer. So for me, it's about forming those consulting skills with your hiring managers. And I think that just then, in essence, is the foundation to building success and whatever that looks like. The other thing I think as well, which is probably one of the biggest challenges we have at Accenture, is that, you know, we need a certain individual and we don't necessarily have the skills within the workforce. So we try and look at different ways collectively to maybe upskill our workforce and then identify maybe where there is specific talent out there that can relate or potentially be identifiable in relation to what the ask was in the initial place. So it's working with what we have, because we're not going to be able just to always come up trump. So yeah, number of things, but I think it's really the hiring manager relationships is the foundation to recruiters' success.
Which is really challenging with all the tech that's imposed on us right now. We've got some really great questions here, and there's 3 questions in particular that are quite similar. So we're talking about disengaged managers, so they're not receptive to our recommendations or suggestions. They are also not taking accountability or any responsibility, throwing recruitment over the fence is ours to fix. So how do we deal with some of those like really, you know, disengaged managers? How do we get their buy-in? How do we get them to start owning recruitment? Because let's face it, in TA, we are always the small and mighty team, right? You've got a whole load of hiring managers in the community and they need to own recruitment. So who wants to take this one?
I don't mind. So I think, it's engagement. And I think that for me is the focus and kind of the word to go to across all of this topic. So we will always have hiring managers who are disengaged because recruitment is only a very small focus or part of their role. And actually, it's about understanding and being able to comprehend their challenges to then effectively partner and work with them. It's like within any relationship, you know, whether it's a work relationship, a friendship, you know, it's about being able to enhance those relationships, understanding what your hiring manager is looking for. They will have frustrations about something if they're not brought into the process. So what are those? Underpinning those. Sometimes I feel like psychology so much comes into our roles. And actually, now when there is a lot of AI out there, our jobs as recruiters is even more important to be able to underpin what those hiring managers' challenges are and overturning those. And again, it's about working with them, giving them realistic timeframes, showing them that you understand their markets, you're telling them and explaining to them what the talent is out there. It's not a quick fix and it does take time, but I think that honesty to get people engaged is, it's very much part of how we can overcome some of those challenges.
I build on that because there's lots really, really good in that. I would think also for us, especially when we're doing that briefing call with our hiring managers, you're finding that candidate, you might start to really build out what that persona is of who you're trying to bring into the organization. Maybe think about what is the persona of the hiring manager I've got. So for us, we're thinking a lot about who comes in, who takes those roles. Really, from our perspective, a disengaged hiring manager in engineering usually is disengaged in a really different way to someone who's a hiring manager in commercial or in design, and they're actually going to have very different things that are going to persuade them otherwise and to get them engaged. So starting to understand what their preferences are, what the things they are that care about, again, are really important. For us, it's slightly stereotypical, but with our engineering, it's like until we start to give them proper intelligence and really good data, we might as well not bother. Whereas that's not always the case in every other part of the business. So starting to think about who are they in these roles. Often it might be someone who's got a really different experience of working with a talent team before they've arrived in your organization. How much of that is a factor? How much of the factor is it that some people might have been promoted into this role? They don't know how valuable we can be as a team. We've got to earn that right to prove it at times. And I think that's worth really thinking about.
Such a good point, Ollie. So when I was at EY with Harpreet, I was hiring all auditors and tax, right? And they have a completely different brain to my current role where I am hiring engineers, right? So how do you influence those different stakeholders? And I think the key attributes that they share is that they all want data. But fundamentally, it's trying to put yourself in the hiring manager's persona to ensure that you're getting the right outcome. Harpreet, I know you're dying to talk about this.
Yeah. So for me, right, it's always listening, right? Some skill that I've kind of developed over the years is listen. So when you're going in a meeting, is listen to the frustrations they're going to have to your idea, and really take that on and go, and not be defensive. And really think there's a reason why this person's saying this, not just because they want to be bad today. It's got to be more of a reason than that. And actually go, who is my best stakeholders that I'm going to start this project with and show success? So don't always implement change with your most difficult stakeholder. Go and implement change with your best stakeholders and have that as a case study to use across. So that is something that's worked for me across in different service lines. So I don't just work in a service line, I work within 6 different service lines. So everybody's got different ideas, different ways. So really, I think the biggest thing is empathy and listening and having really clear expectations. This is what I expect from you, but this is what I'm going to give back to you. And with clear deadlines, I think you just can't go wrong.
I love that. Divide and rule some of your stakeholders. I have to say I do that as well, so it's brilliant. We've got a specific question here, which is a very direct example, and I think it's something that we all suffer from at some point with hiring managers. So how would you handle a situation where there is a request from the hiring manager that it fundamentally does not think about the candidate experience? So there is a degree of conflict there around the process. So the example given here is the hiring manager has given you very strict availability for an interview that does not align with the candidate. And this candidate is a white peacock, right? You've been searching for this candidate for like 6 months and they are not giving you the availability. So how would you deal with that situation? Katie, I feel like you've been here.
Yeah, you have to lay down the line and say you have to interview this candidate, But yeah, it's tough, That thing about hiring managers having recruitment as a small part of their day job, it's emphasizing the importance of that element of that day job. And yes, this happens quite often with very senior individuals. People have very little time, very little availability. And again, I think it's just trying to understand and to comprehend why they can't make that interview. and to challenge it in the right way, to have that empathy, like Harpreet said, building that trust, being able then to provide the guidelines and the experience that you have around why the individual should try and make time for the candidate if they possibly can, and how it could impact the candidate experience. So, I don't think there's any miracle way of getting a hiring manager to ultimately give up their time if they've got something very specific that they need to use that time for. But I think the only thing we can do is explain the benefits, obviously the market insights, and the hiring manager being able to understand and have the ability to know that that person is a rarity, or, it's absolutely fundamental for them to give up their time. We just need to drive that through data and insights to hopefully help that conversation and get that interview in place.
So we've gone through quite a few of these questions. So please do keep your fingers on putting some questions forward for the panel here. I've got a question, another one that is quite, where a specific example is required. And this is around, thinking about dealing with referrals, right? So nepotism. So you've got a talent intelligence team. You're doing lots of sourcing. You have a really good understanding of a role, but yet the manager has got a candidate they want to directly refer from their network, and potentially is not the best candidate. So I know that at EY, for instance, I had loads of these. I even had a nepotism folder, right, of graduates. We all have them, we know. So who wants to take this one?
So, to be fair, I love a process, and I create a process from the beginning. So again, going back, so my big focus from the business was D&I, we need more females. So I pulled the data points of all the referrals we've had, and from who, they're all males. So it was like, if we want to hire and we want to be inclusive, we've got to do something. But the referrals, they might be the best candidate for the role. So I put my foot down and said, every role has to be open for 10 days, where my team will have 10 days to give you another candidate to put through the process. So for me, if you know that's happening in a business, go to the leadership, go to your talent leaders, and actually voice that. Don't be afraid to voice inclusive hiring. That's why we're here. So use data points, I think for me is the biggest. Create a process where it just doesn't happen that only referrals get through that process.
Same here. It's funny, there's a lot of nodding heads, I think, about this kind of topic. Sometimes for us, we've had it where they love this candidate because they just actually have no idea how much better they might be on the market. And it's all they know. So actually that activity that you said, Harpreet, 100% of actually showing them who else might be available can really do it. The other side of it, we talked about that quality of hire metric. And that's one thing we kind of bang the drum on a lot, which is to say that even if this person is right, like that experience for them where they don't really feel like they've probably earned the role. They've come in, it's some sort of handshake and they're in. The likelihood of them either leaving earlier or not performing a role because they don't really feel like they've actually earned the right. They don't respect the process. They don't respect the organization because they haven't had to do much to get in. So there's this whole thing of actually, it might be quicker to get them in that way, but actually what's that going to do to their experience once they arrive there?
Yeah, I mean, you've heard it here that we've got a team here of experts that are not afraid to say no. I know that in a former role, I kind of got my team to be prickly hedgehogs. So hedgehogs are still, very friendly and nice, but actually sometimes as recruiters, we just need to say no, right? And we are the professional, trusted partners after all. So I think there's real value in that. The other question that we had was really around the advent of technology. So we're seeing more and more technology impacting recruitment, particularly with AI. And this idea of, do we humanize or do we dehumanize the recruitment process? So Ollie, perhaps you want to take this one. So how do we engage with the hiring community and the managers and candidates? And what's your view on this idea of technology? How do we manage it? How do we interface with it? How do we stay on top of it? And also, how do we know that it actually adds value?
Yeah, great question. I'm not going to solve that in one answer on this one. yeah, it's something that's a really live issue for right now for us. It's something we're trying to work out ourselves. We've had interviews in the last week for our engineering roles where our kind of senior engineering leaders are saying, "I'm fairly sure they've used AI or they were explicit about using AI. What's our stance? How do we work it out? Do we value it? Do we not?" It's this thing that we're really trying to work out in the open. As well as I'd say with the kind of context of this conversation is, all this stuff we're talking about is only more important as a skill set and for us to do, both from a skill set and our roles in businesses in the future, but also if there's going to be parts of our roles that are going to be in some way automated, they aren't going to be humanized in the same way before, it puts greater emphasis on us to really building those relationships, actually being a strategic influence back into the organization. For whatever else we do, AI is not going to replace that. So I think we've got to hold on to that as our kind of mantra going forward and not be scared about that. And then it's about actually, in terms of that business language, we also don't want to be, I don't know if the right term is Luddite or something like that, where we're anti-technology also, right? Especially I work in a technology company. If we were anti-tech, that's not great. And finding different ways to trial it and really protect those things we care about most in the candidate experience. We trialed something, we became an apprenticeship accreditor beginning of last year, and that was the first time we used an equivalent of an AI thing, which I'm happy to go into detail more about afterwards. But actually I was quite worried, to be honest, the first time we properly did it. That was really candidate facing before we came into a pipeline. And it worked really well to save some of the team's efficiency. The candidate experience was quite positive. And we got a lot of learnings out of that in terms of a process. So I think it's also about being really clear in our own minds, what's our value, what's our role, but being open-minded about how we can help the business to get there with our kind of embedded technology, if you like.
Yeah, and I guess the second question is, are there any specific tech tools or tools that you've come across recently that are really helping your recruiters to perform better in their roles or to make better hiring decisions?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of in-house tools that we use to help us with things like scheduling interviews. We've also got some recent technologies that we've introduced in regards to support around interview feedback. But it's more around process and reminders to encourage hiring managers to provide tangible feedback after interviews. I think just thinking back to all the questions and actually this topic in general, one thing is absolutely vital, right? And that's people. So where we can automate, where we can use technology in the right way, where we know that we have to be able to say no, we need to push back, we need to have those consulting skills. Those are things that AI can't necessarily do for us. And that's why I think it's more important than ever that this topic is very much kind of the core to what we do as a talent team. So it's having that balance. It's about navigating through what kind of tools, what kind of AI can we use to enhance our process. We use tools to help us with the D&I. We do things like gender balanced shortlisting. There are a number of things that we do to help enhance our process. But actually taking away the process is a whole new ball game for recruitment. And I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, exactly. And the next question, I know that Harpreet has a secret weapon that she's developed, which I am going to steal at some point. So we're going to talk about how Harpreet has specifically ensured that hiring managers dedicate the time in a recruitment briefing to go through the whole recruitment process, to even look at the interview questions, to agree boundaries and parameters, ensuring responsibility and accountability, and also when they're in a hurry, right? Because they're all in a hurry. They think recruitment is, just happens magically. So, Harpreet, how have you put this amazing briefing document that you need to publish together?
So what we're doing, not just me, big team behind, is we are implementing something called gold standard interviewing. So gold standard interviewing actually takes and starts from the time of every briefing call. So what we're doing, gold standard interviewing, is 5 hours of anybody who's interviewing with EY. We have 1 hour of virtual learning, which is unconscious bias. We have another hour of gold standard interviewing, and then we have 3 hours of workshop, which anybody who interviews with us coming up in the next year would have to attend. And only once they attend, they would be allowed to be part of the interview panel. So what we've just said to the recruiters, this document that Becky's mentioned, is every time, every role we have must have a briefing call. Otherwise, the role is not advertised, however long it takes the business to get a briefing call. So what we've agreed with the business, it again is going back to your leaders, really to the top and saying, this is what we want to do and this is the benefits, because we can be wasting so much time with the business interviewing candidates that we could have screened at the beginning. So what we do on the briefing call is the business will send us a job description before the call. If no job description is sent, we'd move the briefing call. So in that call, the recruiters will go through basically every single skill on that JD. Is it actually needed? Is this a tradition because we think we need it? Is it a preference, or is it an actual requirement? Is where the recruiters really come back and question that. And then the other piece we do is all the recruiters will be taking talent insights to the call, whether it's entirely up to you. We've created one page of key things you can put on there. That could be location. Does the business want to hire in a particular location? Does the business want to know if the hiring skills have come locally? What is the challenge of the business? So that would vary depending on, is it your first role? Is it your sixth role you're working on? So that's where we've actually got our recruiters to be trusted advisors and have that confidence to challenge back from day one, not after 6 months.
I love that. So you effectively, if a hiring manager does not have a job description, you postpone the briefing call. Wow. Imagine that. So you heard it works. So have you had any pushback on this?
Yes, we have. We've had plenty of pushback. We've had, I'm not going to do it. What we've done is, as a team, and that is not just recruitment, that is working with our operationals team, that is working with our talent team, that is working with our leaders to say, this is the vision we've got as a business. We need your support. So very clear escalation points to say to the business, if we get this pushback, are you happy for me to use your name? So, yeah.
So, Ollie, I'm intrigued. You're working for a tech engineering firm. How does this work for you then? Like, you know, a lot of these tech engineers, they're on to the next thing, aren't they? On to the next innovation. They don't have time for recruitment. So how do you deal with this?
A few things. This is really timely because about 2 weeks ago, we also introduced the same process where if you do not have a job description, we are not really going to entertain doing anything more. Some pushback, but mainly a success at the moment. One of the things for us has been working really as part of our wider leadership group again. So actually making it part of their expectations. I think we made some assumptions that if you were an engineering leader in the business, you would know this is a major part of your role, to play an active role in people planning, in recruitment, being an advocate and ambassador for those roles. That definitely has not been received everywhere. So actually, how do we create those incentives to do that? Some of that, again, come back to what I was saying before about this is what happens if you don't do it. You know, here are the kind of drawbacks. But also, here's the incentive, right? When we're trying to introduce things around our performance management, so forgive me for the horrible term, but it's live. Actually, if you can't evidence and prove the fact that you are playing an active role in our interview process and everything else about that Harpreet shared, then ultimately, you know, you can't be eligible for, you know, actually exceeding in your role every year or anything else that might come with that from an incentivization. Like you have to do it. It's a whole team thing. So some people we get it. Some it's really a learned behavior. But we're just trying to, in different areas, in both educate and incentivize that.
Brilliant. And we've got a question from Nikki. So thanks, Nikki, for putting your name on there. So one of the things that they're struggling with is the hiring manager always knows best, particularly when you have HR hiring managers as well. So how do you ensure that effectively... Hang on, we're trying to drive the change in talent acquisition, but there's still a lot of resistance, right? Because the hiring manager still knows what's best, and there's effectively at the SMT level, so we're talking about the management level, perhaps not at the senior leadership level, where they're all bought into the strategy, they're all bought into the people strategy. So how do you get them to really align to your strategies?
Yeah, so I think actually it's a really good question. I suppose it depends what part of the strategy that people aren't bought into is what I would want to look at first. I think one key significance for me in regards to that question is that if there is senior leadership who are brought in, then it's actually leaning on those individuals to help facilitate and educate the next level down. You know, we do have this a lot, very much so, where you will have maybe hiring managers, for example, wanting to make decisions on a candidate, but actually the feedback doesn't warrant the decision to be made as a successful hire. So it's actually being able to question that. So everything needs to be backed up. If someone is pushing back, why are they pushing back? Asking that question, well, you know, why are you not bought into the way that we do recruiting? Why are you not bought into our processes? What do you suggest instead? I don't always think it's a case of saying, if you don't do this, we're not going to be able to do this for you. I think a prime example within Accenture is we recruit specifically for our UK market, but we also recruit for global roles and market-wide positions. And we find sometimes that it's a real struggle to get those hiring managers on board. And a lot of it comes down to process within different geographies. So actually understanding what the drawbacks are or why someone is not responding in the way that you would expect them to actually helps you navigate around that question. So the simple question I would say to Nikki is, have you asked what the challenge is and why you're pushing back, to be able then to open up that conversation further?
Yeah, it all goes back to active listening, isn't it? So it's really taking a step back and asking more questions and really trying to identify the nub of the issue. And we have another really great question, and this is around enabling hiring managers, because often we're seen as like the oversight function, that we're perhaps policing recruitment, but what we want are managers to be more self-sufficient. So how do you get them to be more self-sufficient? And the other part of this question is that it allows you to focus on the right things, and the managers are really clear on what they need to focus on.
Yeah. So again, this is actually a really good question. So self-sufficiency, the only way we can get our hiring managers to be self-sufficient if they are brought into what the expectation is. And that again comes back to an education piece. So I think, Harpreet, what you mentioned about, the hiring briefing call, getting exactly what you need from that hiring manager is absolutely fundamental to then the knock-on effect of the candidate experience, the engagement. So it is definitely about setting, not necessarily, I don't like to use the word rules, but setting the expectations, setting the guidance, explaining how an individual's responsibility will add value to the recruiting process, how they will make a difference and how they will see the value themselves. If someone's given the ability to make a decision and there's going to be a good outcome from it, then believe me, the more you encourage, the more you reward, the more you appreciate, you get buy-in. So I think it's all of those things combined, which actually is kind of helping people being more efficient.
Yeah, I love that answer. And that I think there's a lot of issues that we've seen today from all the questions, but there's one that I think is really important, and this is about thinking around the decisions that hiring managers are making and preventing them from making bad hiring decisions. So in a scenario where some of the employees that have been hired have not passed their probation, so how would you try to prevent that? Perhaps, Harpreet, you might answer this one.
Yeah, so as I mentioned previously, we've done a massive piece on quality of hire, because I just think, like you said, we might be getting people who are not experts at interviewing, right? Just because you've got a number of years of experience does not mean you can interview. So interviewing is a skill. So for us we went back, we sent a survey to the business asking, how comfortable are you interviewing? And then we looked at the people with the survey versus the quality of hires we had in the business. So really, I just think it's listening on the ground as recruiters and actually going, we're actually asking a business to do something that they haven't been ever trained on, or they don't understand what our vision is. So I just think it's going back and actually understanding as a team, what is our vision? How can we make sure when we're hiring it's inclusive? Does the hiring manager actually know who their recruiter is? Do they know they can go back to their recruiter and then ask for help? Do they know that, like, one thing we started doing is at the beginning of any role, there's a wash-up call with every single person that's going to be on the interview panel. Because what we found was they weren't talking to each other and they were asking the same questions. So what we've done is at the beginning of the process is get together, actually know exactly what you're looking for, not the person, but the role. And then at the end, we do a wash-up before a decision is made. Have we captured everything as well? And then the other thing we've done is say to individuals, do not make a decision unless you're sure. If you feel like you need further advice, there's people here who can help.
If I can, and I'll pass on to you as well. I have so much to say about this topic, haven't we? Like, we've mentioned quality of hire a lot today as well, and I think there's a whole interesting separate debate about who actually owns that quality of hire. You know, it might be on talent to report on it, but actually, is that something that we as a kind of talent part of the organization is responsible for? Kind of my view at the moment, it's probably not, but I think we definitely play a part. So I think there's like really interesting stuff there. And then also, I suppose, thinking specifically about individual hiring decisions, but also about the strategic stuff in your organization. Talent's role isn't necessarily to make all those decisions, but it is to bring that insight and intelligence to help them make as good a decision as possible. Ultimately, it's not our call. And so, like, all we can do really is make sure we've done as better process, best candidate experience as we can with all the insight and intelligence they could possibly have, and then give them the room to make that decision, right?
Yeah. Just one quick thing on that. I think as well, there's two things which are crucial to not having that situation 6 months down the line. And I think one is making sure that you've got the right people interviewing and your best people interviewing, but also the interview technique. So interviewers, are very good at asking questions, getting the candidate to answer, responding in a way where they're getting what they need regarding the skill set. But actually, are you able as an interviewer to ask questions that enable you to understand if that person can pivot into the environment that they could be joining? And I think that fundamentally, that pivoting is so crucial and important to making those right decisions. And that's sometimes where I see things fall down.
I love that. I'm going to remember that one. I have one question because it's something that I struggle with, particularly in this new world that we're inhabiting post-COVID and the digitalization that we've seen, remote working versus hybrid working versus back in office. And it's fair to say that since the pandemic, our whole work environment has been disrupted. And so the question is, has that evolved a different type of stakeholder engagement style from a TA perspective? And it would be good to get your views on whether you see the relationships being managed differently, sort of pre-COVID versus post-COVID, and what would your top tips be to recruiters in the new world?
Yeah, this is quite a significant one, I think, for me and my team. So we have a very flexible working policy, and a number of our recruiters will work a hybrid model, which we find works for us as a team. But we've definitely seen that shift. I think we can always kind of revert back to COVID times and everyone working remotely, and that people become susceptible to that continuation of working from home. But I actually think that our economy and our markets are making those challenges more so than the remote working as well. So a lot of organisations have had that period of time where they haven't recruited. And that then means that we've got new interviewers or people who need to be trained up, educated on how we recruit to be able to make the best hiring decisions. So as much as, yes, I think working from home, not being face-to-face with our stakeholders, not having those coffee chats, not having those in-person meetings does impact, I also think that time frame of where there probably was a little bit of a stop to recruiting within a lot of organisations and quite lengthy pauses means that we have to really focus on bringing people back to basics and understanding what recruitment does and the model to efficiently hire people.
Cool. Does anyone? So it's our last question and answer. Does anyone want to just take that one because it's a really important one? I appreciate that we're running a bit late because the board has a different time to the agenda, so we're running about 15 minutes late. But I think this is a really good question. So, Harpreet, do you want to take this one or Ollie?
So for us we've seen like that big shift, but we work as a hybrid model as well, but we do have like some anchor days. So what we've said to our recruiters is actually spend time with the business to understand what they actually do. So sit next to them, have that face-to-face time again, if possible, to really understand what do they do on a daily basis and become that trusted advisor for us. So we've made, we've said in whatever possible way, whether that's a Teams call, is have like a weekly, some connection with the business, whether that's, like I said, a weekly call or they're actually going into the office, sitting down and having a face-to-face. I find the face-to-face relationships is the best relationships for me. That's the way I work. I think to really spend that time and work as one team is about face-to-face at times, if possible.
Brilliant. I think that's it, Ollie. I'm sorry.